The year is 2018. The NFL is beginning season number 99, and for nearly 2 decades, the quarterback position had belonged to a select few, the same names dominating from September to February. Tom Brady was 41 years old and somehow still playing the best football of his life. He'd just won the MVP at age 40 and thrown for 505 yards in the Super Bowl. He came into 2018 insulted by the notion that Nick Foles might have just ended his run. Drew Brees was chasing one final ring and a record, approaching Peyton Manning as the NFL's all-time passing leader. Like Brady, he had no business being as good as he was at 39. But Brees' game, built on touch, rhythm, and timing, had aged like a fine wine. Aaron Rodgers, now the league's highest-paid player, was tasked with carrying a lackluster Packers roster on his back again. After a broken collarbone spoiled his 2017, it was time for him to remind those who forgot that he was still the most talented quarterback on planet Earth. Ben Roethlisberger had the most dynamic skill duo in football in Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, but Bell was holding out for a new contract with no return in sight. Phillip Rivers, year 15, still firing lasers with the ugliest throwing motion in the league, and Matt Ryan, just 2 years removed from his MVP season, was still performing at an elite level. With Julio Jones in his prime and Steve Sarkisian at offensive coordinator, 2018 was a chance to prove the Falcons' window had not closed. These franchise quarterbacks who had spent over a decade torching secondaries were all still at the top of their game. But behind them, we had a 23-year-old gunslinger in Kansas City with half baseball mechanics named Patrick Mahomes, who was taking over for Alex Smith. 1 year earlier, he'd only played in a meaningless Week 17 game. Now he was the starter. In Houston, Deshaun Watson was healthy again after tearing his ACL as a rookie. Before that injury, he'd truly been the most electric player in the NFL. And Carson Wentz was returning from his own ACL tear that effectively cost him the 2017 MVP award, ready to reclaim the job Nick Foles had turned into a Super Bowl fairy tale. But the Rams were the NFL's sexiest team. Sean McVay, at just 32 years old, had turned Jared Goff into an efficient machine and Todd Gurley into the league's greatest offensive weapon. Not to mention LA loaded up on star power with Aqib Talib, Marcus Peters, and Ndamukong Suh and Brandon Cooks. However, the 49ers were everyone's dark horse. After being traded from New England to San Francisco, Jimmy Garoppolo went 5-0 to end 2017, earning a $137 million payday that officially made him Kyle Shanahan's guy. They weren't the only team who felt like they were just a quarterback away, though. The Vikings, fresh off the Minneapolis Miracle and an NFC Championship blowout loss, retooled by signing Kirk Cousins to the first fully guaranteed multi-year quarterback contract in NFL history. Unfortunately, he was about to be chased down by the NFC North's newest premier edge rusher, Khalil Mack. The Bears acquired arguably the most dominant defensive player in the NFL from the Raiders, who had as much buzz around them as anyone thanks to their $100 million man John Gruden, back on the sideline after a decade in the booth. In the draft, brash, undersized Heisman winner Baker Mayfield went to the Cleveland graveyard for quarterbacks, taken ahead of Saquon Barkley, Sam Darnold, and Josh Allen. He brought more confidence than any rookie had a right to. And at 32, one pick after the Patriots selected running back Sony Michel, the Ravens took Louisville's Lamar Jackson, the 2016 Heisman winner who had been told he should play wide receiver. The Ravens said no, he'll play quarterback and we will build the future around him. When the 2018 season began, no one knew it would be the last year all those great quarterbacks would play at an elite level together, the final chapter of the quarterback golden era. This video is sponsored by Walter Picks. I first heard about Walter Picks a couple years ago because this guy in my fantasy league was using it for literally everything, to the point that we've just been calling him Walter for years now. Walter Picks is an app backed by machine learning for sports betting and fantasy insights that you can use right on your phone. With the most up-to-date projections, you'll find the best player props, game bets, and DFS lineups before the lines move. I'll be the first to say sports betting is very complicated, but for me, Walter Picks makes it fun and simple. They offer 3 different plans to choose from. I'm on the elite plan, and easily my favorite feature is the trade analyzer, where I can sync up my specific league, which has a bunch of unique settings, so conventional rankings don't really work as well. Aside from that, I can also easily spot good props to bet with the player prop evaluator. So join thousands of us who are already using it to win. Download Walter Picks today by clicking my link in the description or scan the QR code to get a 7-day free trial. The season kicked off in Philadelphia, where the defending champion Eagles raised their first Super Bowl banner in franchise history. But Carson Wentz was yet to return, and the offense that hummed the year prior looked clunky with Nick Foles under center. The opener was a rematch of the previous January's divisional round against Atlanta, and once again the Falcons' offense stalled repeatedly. Foles managed only 117 passing yards, but the defense held firm and the Eagles won ugly, 18-12. A few days later, Aaron Rodgers welcomed Khalil Mack to the NFC North on Sunday Night Football. Within 2 quarters, the Raiders' decision to ship him out looked like one of the dumbest trades in NFL history. Mack had a sack, a forced fumble, and a pick six by halftime. And to add injury to insult, Rodgers was carted off the field. But incredibly, he returned on one leg, limping, barely able to plant, and threw 3 second-half touchdowns to erase a 20-0 deficit. The Packers won 24-23 after a 75-yard touchdown pass to Randall Cobb, and thus the legend of Perk Rodgers was born. But Week 1 was also the revival of Fitzmagic. Bucs quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick, 35 years old and starting for his 7th team, carved up the Saints for 417 yards and 4 scores, outgunning Drew Brees 48-40 on his own turf. In Week 2, he delivered another 400 yards and 4 touchdowns for another win over Philly. This couldn't last, of course. Tampa started 2-0, averaging 37 points a game, followed by back-to-back losses and a pile of interceptions. Meanwhile, in Cleveland, the Browns had hope. Winless for nearly 2 years, they opened against the Steelers in a storm that turned the field into a swamp. Myles Garrett took over with 2 sacks and 2 forced fumbles, and the Browns took it to overtime. After 70 grueling minutes, it ended 21-21. The losing streak was over, even if the winless streak wasn't. But just 2 weeks later, Baker Mayfield would take over at QB and usher in a new era by leading the Browns to a win against the Jets. While New England started sluggish, they handled Houston in Week 1, but the next Sunday, Jacksonville got their revenge. Blake Bortles tossed 4 touchdowns, and Jalen Ramsey's defense kept Brady in check. The Jaguars looked like the team that should have gone to the Super Bowl 8 months earlier. But we'd seen this Patriots movie before. Early doubt, mid-season dominance, and inevitable January success. However, the player that changed the entire league was Patrick Mahomes, who began his career with 4 touchdowns in Week 1, 6 more in Week 2. After Week 4, 14 touchdowns, 0 picks, and the flashiest quarterback highlight reel in the NFL. It was instant transcendence. The NFL had never seen a quarterback make the impossible look so routine. By the end of the month, Kansas City was undefeated, averaging nearly 40 points a game. The Giants, on the other hand, thought they were rebooting with Saquon Barkley, who dazzled from day one, but every elite Barkley performance came in another loss. Eli Manning couldn't move and couldn't throw deep, so New York started 1-3, and the critics were saying they were idiots to draft a running back instead of a quarterback. Up north, the Vikings were supposed to be contenders now with Kirk Cousins, but they could only tie Green Bay in Week 2 after Daniel Carlson missed 3 kicks. Then a stunning 27-6 loss to the Bills, who were 17-point underdogs. Rookie Josh Allen hurdled Anthony Barr for his first signature play, and the Vikings were booed off their own field. In Oakland, John Gruden's $100 million comeback began with an anticlimactic 33-13 loss to the Rams. After 4 weeks, Khalil Mack alone had as many sacks as the entire Raiders defense combined. And across the Bay, the optimism that had carried over from Jimmy Garoppolo's 5-0 stretch in 2017 vanished instantly. Week 3 against Kansas City, with the 49ers trailing big and Garoppolo scrambling, he went down with a torn ACL. The fruits of their grand rebuild would have to wait another year. In Week 6, the league's past, present, and future finally met in prime time. The first half was all New England. Sony Michel punched in a couple scores, and the Pats headed to the locker room up 24-9. But in the second half, Mahomes threw 4 touchdowns, launching a 67-yard TD to Kareem Hunt, then a game-tying 75-yarder to Tyreek Hill, dragging Kansas City back from 15 points down. But with the game tied 40-40 and 2 minutes left, Brady got the ball one last time and predictably marched the Patriots into field goal range to walk it off for a 43-40 win. However, Mahomes would get another shot at the Pats in time. And equally explosive were the Rams. In Week 4, they'd beaten the Vikings in a primetime shootout 38-31. In October, they followed that with statement wins over the Seahawks, Niners, and Packers. Todd Gurley was in the MVP race. By Halloween, he already had nearly 1,200 yards from scrimmage and 15 touchdowns, and the Rams were 8-0, the last undefeated team standing. Down in New Orleans, one of the most prestigious records was broken. On a Monday night against Washington, Drew Brees passed Peyton Manning to become the NFL's all-time leader in passing yards. An incredible feat for someone who'd spent nearly 2 decades defying every physical and professional limitation. Not only was Brees smashing records, he was also winning. The Saints were in the midst of what would eventually be a 10-game win streak, including a payback game against the Vikings. New Orleans wasn't as flashy as a Kansas City or LA, but with Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas, Brees had all the weaponry he needed. But the Steelers' premier weapon, Le'Veon Bell, still had not reported. He'd forfeited half a season's worth of game checks to this point, and yet Pittsburgh kept it moving thanks to James Conner, a hometown kid who ran like every carry might be his last. Conner had 100 yards rushing in every October game. The locker room was a minefield, with Antonio Brown and Big Ben's feud about to boil over. But on the field, they were still dangerous. After starting 1-2-1, Pittsburgh rallied to 4-2-1. While the defending champs were unraveling, Carson Wentz had finally returned and looked good. But still, they fell to the Titans in overtime after Marcus Mariota led a 16-play walk-off drive. Then in Week 7, they crumbled again, up 17-0 on Carolina, only to lose 21-17 at home. At 3-4, Philadelphia had a classic Super Bowl hangover. But their rivals were in crisis mode. Dak Prescott looked broken without Dez Bryant or Jason Witten, and the Cowboys were also 3-4, averaging a pathetic 20 points per game. Jerry Jones had seen enough. He traded a first-round pick to Oakland for Amari Cooper, a move mocked across the league as desperate. Jerry would have the last laugh, though, as that decision would end up giving Dallas new life down the stretch. Unlike them, the Bears, behind new coach Matt Nagy, had become a clear contender. Their defense was among the best, and in Week 4, Mitchell Trubisky threw 6 touchdowns in a 48-10 demolition of Tampa Bay, while the Vikings stabilized after their disastrous September, with Adam Thielen going for 100 yards in each of their first 8 games. They sat at 4-3-1, but the Packers were 3-3-1, and the relationship between Aaron Rodgers and coach Mike McCarthy was visibly eroding. And despite the Rams headlining the NFC, LA's other team was quietly building something great. Phillip Rivers was putting together his final great season, Melvin Gordon was dominant, and rookie Derwin James was an all-pro caliber player the second he stepped on the field. At the end of October, the Chargers were 5-2, yet flying under the radar. In Baltimore, Joe Flacco was also playing his best football in years, but it still wasn't enough. The Ravens were 4-4 despite arguably the league's best defense. Lamar was waiting, and it was only a matter of time before the future replaced the past. In Week 11 on Monday Night Football, we were blessed with one of the greatest regular season games of all time. 2 9-1 teams, 2 offensive masterminds, and 1 quarterback who could do things humans weren't supposed to. Originally meant to be played in Mexico City, the field conditions forced Chiefs-Rams back to Los Angeles. What followed was the track meet of all track meets. Mahomes threw 6 touchdowns and 3 picks. Goff threw 4 TDs. There were 3 defensive touchdowns, 6 lead changes, 105 total points, and by the end it was Rams 54, Chiefs 51, the highest scoring Monday night game ever, and a potential Super Bowl preview. The win kept the Rams perfect at home, but it didn't feel like either team lost. And it also felt like football itself had evolved. Even veteran players watching from home admitted they'd never seen anything like it. It wasn't the Super Bowl, but it was the game of the year, of the decade, and the one everyone would remember. But even if the Rams and Chiefs owned the future, Drew Brees reminded everyone that right here, right now, he was every bit as good as Patrick Mahomes. After their iffy start, New Orleans morphed into a buzzsaw. They actually handed the Rams their first loss of the year, 45-35. A win sealed by Michael Thomas's long touchdown, which he celebrated by pulling out a hidden flip phone, a tribute to Joe Horn's iconic celebration from 2003. They then dismantled Cincinnati 51-14 and humiliated the Eagles 48-7. The Saints were destroying everyone, and despite Mahomes' unthinkable year, Brees was the MVP frontrunner at this point. But the comeback story of the season was Andrew Luck. After a shoulder injury kept him out all of 2017, he was back, and in November he caught fire. The Colts started 1-5, but by the end of the month they'd won 5 straight. Luck threw 3 or more touchdowns in 8 straight games. The offensive line had only allowed 2 sacks in the past 2 months, and rookie guard Quentin Nelson was another instant All-Pro. Head coach Frank Reich had built one of the best offenses in the league. By Thanksgiving, Indy had gained a full head of steam. And for the Ravens, the future arrived ahead of schedule. Joe Flacco went down with a hip injury in Week 9, so Lamar Jackson's first start came against Cincinnati, where he carried the ball 26 times for 119 yards, running a new playbook designed for his speed. Lamar stole the job, going 3-0 in his first 3 starts, and the team that was living off defense had a new offensive wrinkle nobody could prepare for. In the AFC South, the Texans were on a mission. After starting 0-3, they rattled off 9 straight wins. Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins were as in sync as anyone in the league, and the defense, led by Watt and Clowney, was finally healthy again. But somehow the Cowboys were not dead either. After the Amari Cooper trade, everything changed. The offense opened up, Dak Prescott looked confident again, and Ezekiel Elliott began running with purpose. They beat the Eagles on Sunday night, then the Falcons, and then Washington on Thanksgiving, a 3-game streak that put them back in first place. And the defense, led by rookie Leighton Vander Esch, was flying around like it was 1995. Speaking of defense, the Bears kept rolling. They took down Minnesota on Sunday Night Football and beat Detroit twice, improving to 8-3. Trubisky certainly wasn't anything special, but he didn't have to be. Khalil Mack led the kind of defensive unit that could win a playoff game by itself. But November also brought one of the worst injuries of the decade, when Alex Smith suffered a compound fracture of his tibia and fibula on November 18th against the Texans, eerily on the same date and yard line as Joe Theismann's famous 1985 injury. Smith had kept Washington atop the NFC East to that point, but once he went down, their season ended. For years, the Seahawks had lived in the shadow of their own past. The Legion of Boom and Marshawn Lynch were gone, and most thought the glory days had ended. But by the time the calendar flipped to December, Seattle had rebuilt their identity. Pete Carroll leaned into an old-school formula, running the football, controlling the clock, and letting Russell Wilson make plays when it mattered. Second-year back Chris Carson ran as hard as anyone, while Tyler Lockett emerged as Wilson's new number 1. Their moment came in Week 16 on Sunday Night Football against the Chiefs, where Wilson outshined Mahomes, throwing 3 touchdowns in a 38-31 win that clinched a playoff berth. After a 4-5 start, the Seahawks were back as a new version of themselves. And in Cleveland, the Browns were actually fun. After years of embarrassment, Baker Mayfield turned the franchise into appointment viewing, with offensive coordinator Freddie Kitchens letting him rip. Baker carved up the Panthers and Bengals, barked at opposing coaches, and walked off every field like he owned it. The Browns went 5-2 in their final 7 games, and Mayfield had broken the NFL rookie record with 27 touchdown passes for a team that hadn't won a single game the year before. But while Baker was building the Browns up, the Steelers were cooked. In early December, Pittsburgh blew a 16-point lead at home to the Chargers, then lost to the Raiders, and finally fell in heartbreaking fashion to the Saints. Bell never returned, and the stars who had carried them for years were now at the center of every headline for the wrong reasons. To make matters worse, the Ravens were riding Lamar straight to the top of the division. In Week 16, they went to Los Angeles and stunned the 11-3 Chargers, holding Phillip Rivers without a touchdown. The Ravens took control of the AFC North, and for the first time in 5 years, the Steelers were not the division's alpha. The Killer Bees era was over, and the Lamar era had begun. On a more fun note, the Dolphins came through with the play of the year. With seconds left, trailing 33-28, the Dolphins pulled off the miracle in Miami. Ryan Tannehill threw a short pass to Kenny Stills, who lateraled to Devontae Parker, who pitched it back to Kenyon Drake, who then sprinted past Rob Gronkowski playing deep safety and scored, making for one of the wildest finishes in NFL history. But New England still managed to close the season with 2 straight wins, locking up the AFC's number 2 seed. And the Saints kept dominating too, even if Brees' MVP odds were fading. Their offense slowed down in December, but their defense picked up the slack, and they locked up home field advantage in the NFC at 13-3. But the surprise of the year was the Chicago Bears. In Week 14, they faced the Rams on Sunday night and held them to just 6 points. Goff threw 4 interceptions, Todd Gurley disappeared, and Matt Nagy was headed for Coach of the Year. The Bears ended the regular season 12-4, NFC North champions with the most dangerous defense in football thanks to Khalil Mack, who was the runner-up to Defensive Player of the Year Aaron Donald. Elsewhere in the NFC North, Aaron Rodgers gutted through a tough season with a thin receiver core and a stale offensive scheme. And on December 2nd, Green Bay lost at home to the 2-9 Cardinals, falling to 4-7-1. Just a few hours later, Mike McCarthy was fired after 13 seasons, a Super Bowl win, and 9 playoff trips. The Packers limped to 6-9-1, needing a reset. And in the AFC West, the Chiefs looked unbeatable for most of the year, but December exposed their flaws. Their defense couldn't stop anyone. A Week 16 loss to Seattle and a Week 15 collapse against the Chargers nearly cost them the number 1 seed. The Chargers, meanwhile, matched Kansas City's 12-4 record after a miraculous comeback win at Arrowhead. Phillip Rivers hit Mike Williams for 3 touchdowns, then a gutsy 2-point conversion to win 29-28. But the tiebreaker still went to Kansas City. Mahomes ended with over 5,000 yards and 50 passing touchdowns, securing the AFC's top seed and, of course, the MVP. Mahomes was the new face of the NFL, but Brady and Brees were not to be written off. Nor was Andrew Luck. The Colts finished one of the best turnarounds in recent memory, going 9-1 down the stretch, capping it off with a Week 17 win over the Titans to clinch a playoff berth. The Colts were the team no one wanted to face in January. Meanwhile, Jerry Jones looked like a genius. Amari Cooper exploded for 217 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Eagles, and the Cowboys won 7 of their last 8 to take the NFC East at 10-6. The postseason opened with Andrew Luck and the Colts continuing their red-hot run. From the opening drive, they looked like a better team than the Texans. Marlon Mack gassed Houston for nearly 150 yards, and the Colts jumped out 21-0 before halftime. Luck, once doubted to ever throw a football again, had returned to playoff form. That same evening in Dallas, Dak Prescott had his clutch playoff moment. Ezekiel Elliott bullied his way to 137 yards, but the play of the night belonged to Dak. On 3rd and 14, with the game on the line, he scrambled up the middle, dove over a defender, and set his offense up at the 1 for the game-clinching touchdown. Dallas won 24-22, the kind of gritty, grown-man win they'd been searching for years. On Sunday in Baltimore, the Chargers arrived with a plan. They lined up 7 defensive backs at a time to neutralize Lamar Jackson's speed, and it worked to perfection. LA held Baltimore to 69 total yards through 3 quarters. Phillip Rivers didn't need to do much, and even though Lamar rallied late, throwing 2 touchdowns to Michael Crabtree in the 4th, it was too little too late. 23-17 Chargers. The rookie had electrified the league, but playoff football was a different beast. Then came the wildcard finale in Chicago. Nick Foles leading the Eagles into Soldier Field as Carson Wentz was shut down with a back injury. The Eagles trailed some of the game, but Foles drove them 60 yards in the final minutes and found Golden Tate on 4th and goal to take the lead. Chicago answered with one last drive, setting up Cody Parkey for a 43-yard field goal to win it. The snap, the hold, the kick, and doink off the upright, then doink again off the crossbar. Philadelphia 16, Chicago 15. The defending champs lived to fight another week, and the double doink entered NFL mythology. Snow fell at Arrowhead as Patrick Mahomes made his postseason debut, but the cold didn't bother him one bit. The Colts defense was shredded as the Chiefs built a 24-7 halftime lead without even one passing touchdown. Kansas City 31, Indy 13. Next in Los Angeles, McVay shelved the fancy stuff and unleashed brute force C.J. Anderson, signed off the street a few weeks earlier to fill in for Todd Gurley, who was suffering from knee inflammation. Gurley returned and combined with Anderson for 238 rushing yards as the Rams bullied Dallas 30-22. Jared Goff threw for just 186 yards, but the Rams controlled the line of scrimmage and eliminated Dallas convincingly. But if there was ever a game that reminded everyone who ran the AFC, it was the Sunday afternoon game. The Chargers came into Foxborough 12-4, loaded and confident, but by halftime, they were down 35-7. James White caught 15 passes, Sony Michel scored 3 times, and the Patriots sent Rivers home 41-28 in a game that was not nearly as close as the score indicated. After that, the Eagles struck first in the Big Easy, scoring a pair of first-quarter touchdowns, and the Saints looked stunned. Then Drew Brees settled in, a fake punt conversion by Taysom Hill, a 79-yard touchdown drive, and the Superdome came alive. The game turned late when Alshon Jeffrey let a pass slip through his hands straight into Marshawn Lattimore's. The Saints survived 20-14, ending any chance of a Nick Foles repeat. And with that, the NFL was headed for one of the greatest conference championship rounds of all time. In the NFC Championship, the Saints jumped out early, leading 13-0, but the Rams bounced back, and in the fourth quarter came the most haunting play in Saints history. Tied 20-20 with under 2 minutes left, Brees dropped back and threw to Tommy Lee Lewis near the sideline, and Nickel Roby-Coleman blasted him about 10 years before the ball arrived. Everyone saw it except for the guys in zebra stripes who couldn't be bothered to throw a flag. The Saints settled for a field goal, then the Rams forced overtime, and Zerline drilled a 57-yarder to send LA to the Super Bowl. What could have been Brees' storybook ending instead became the most infamous no-call in NFL history. On the bright side, the AFC title game at Arrowhead was everything fans hoped for and more. The Patriots dominated to start, but the Chiefs stormed back behind Mahomes, and the fourth quarter was pure madness. 4 lead changes in the final 8 minutes. With seconds left, Harrison Butker hit a field goal to tie it 31-31 and send it to overtime. But the infamous play came before that. On the Pats' final drive, D Ford lined up offsides, nullifying what would have been a game-clinching interception for Kansas City. Instead, Brady capitalized, hitting Gronk and then Rex Burkhead for the go-ahead score. New England wins the overtime toss, Mahomes never touches the ball, and Burkhead punches it in 37-31. Truly the last great act of the Pats dynasty in the AFC, colliding head-on with the dawn of the Chiefs dynasty. The stage was set in Atlanta. The 13-3 Rams, the NFC's new powerhouse, against the 11-5 Patriots. It was billed as a clash of generational titans. Sean McVay, viewed as football's sharpest young offensive mind, facing Bill Belichick, the 66-year-old who had architected some of the greatest defenses of all time dating back to the 1980s Giants. And then the game started and nothing happened. Belichick's defense came out in a 6-1 front, clogging the Rams' zone run lanes that had paved the way for Todd Gurley and CJ Anderson all season. Every snap, the Pats disguised coverages, shifted fronts, and dared Jared Goff to read them post-snap. And at this stage of his career, he couldn't. It took the Rams nearly 3 full quarters to muster just a field goal. But the Patriots weren't much better. Brady threw a pick on his first pass of the night, and the Rams defense, led by Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh, made life miserable for him. At halftime, the score was 3-0, the second lowest scoring Super Bowl halftime in history. And in a season headlined by offense, it was a relic of the 1970s. By the third quarter, the general feeling had long shifted from excitement to pure boredom. The Rams couldn't run, and Gurley barely saw the field with his mysterious knee injury, as the final stretch of this season was effectively the beginning of the end of his career, and Goff was overwhelmed. The Patriots deployed the same quiet, relentless patience that their dynasty was built upon. Then, midway through the fourth quarter, they finally broke through. With 10 minutes to go, Brady took over at his own 31 and put together a vintage drive. Gronk for 18 yards, Edelman for 13, Gronk again for 29. Then on 1st and goal, Sony Michel crossed the goal line to give the Pats a 10-3 lead. That one drive was the difference, and it was the only touchdown scored all night. The Rams had a chance to respond, but to no avail. Goff took a deep shot to Cooks, and Stephon Gilmore intercepted it, sealing the game. Stephen Gostkowski's field goal made it 13-3, the final score and the lowest score in Super Bowl history. Julian Edelman did manage to torment the Rams secondary for 141 yards and was named MVP. Brady, at 41, became the oldest quarterback ever to win a Super Bowl, and Belichick, the master chess player, had just run circles around McVay. It wasn't pretty, nor was it fun to watch, but it was New England's 6th Lombardi trophy, their last masterpiece, and the final Super Bowl of the quarterback golden era. However, for neutral fans, this lackluster game was the one blemish on an otherwise perfect season. Thank you for watching this video sponsored by Walter Picks. Don't forget to download Walter Picks with this QR code or via the link below for your fantasy and sports betting needs.